Today, I'm super excited to have a special guest with us, Jeff Burlew, investigative reporter with the Tallahassee Democrat. Jeff's going to come and talk with us today about the public corruption trial of former Democratic gubernatorial nominee Andrew Gillum. So stick with us, you don't want to miss it.
To hear it from these other jurors, there was a sort of a lone juror in there who, according to them, just refused to budge. They said would not participate in deliberations.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by City and State, Florida.
Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with me, Dara Cam, and oh my gosh, you guys are in for such a treat today because live in person at the Lafayette Park Rehab Center, I have with me special guest, Tallahassee Democrat investigative reporter Jeff Burlew, who is also my new BFF after we bonded during the trial at the federal courthouse over public corruption charges against former Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum and his longtime political mentor Sharon Letman Hicks. Welcome.
Hey there.
To A Deeper Dive.
How are you?
I am okay.
I'm so honored to be here. Shocked that anyone would want me on their podcast.
You're silly. We want to hear what you have to say because Jeff has been reporting on this what is it called? Operation Capital Currency investigation by the FBI.
That's right.
And
started in 2015.
In 2015, netted another former Tallahassee mayor, Scott Maddox.
That's right.
His longtime aide,
Paige Carter-Smith,
and
J.T. Burnett, local wealthy developer business guy.
Yes, and so Jeff is going to tell us all about the investigation and what went on behind the scenes in the courthouse. We can give you guys a little bit of a glimpse as to what that was like. It was a 2-week trial followed by five tumultuous days of jury deliberations.
That's right.
And what did the jury finally decide?
They acquitted Gillum on a charge of making false statements to the FBI, and then they hung on these 18 other counts, one a conspiracy charge, and then all the rest of those were wire fraud.
And basically the charges were that they had bilked political donors out of contributions and steered that money to Andrew Gillum for his personal use while he was in the run-up to his gubernatorial run.
That's right. That's the short way of saying it. The government spent days, going through all of that in painstaking detail.
I have to say, Jeff arrived with he was a little bit of a nervous Nelly, even though we're friends. He arrived with his laptop and a stack of papers. So
this is a very small pile.
It is a small pile compared to what he had with him in the courthouse. But fortunately, you had paper copies of things, and he was a huge help to me as I was covering. I covered the opening arguments in the case, and then I got busy with legislative stuff, and then I went back. I was on verdict watch, so we were
sitting in the lobby a lot.
Yeah,
trying to not freeze to death from the excessive air conditioning. In
the federal courthouse, for some reason, they feel the need to have a sub-zero climate. It is, literally we had blankets. We were covered up with blankets. Yeah. I had 4 layers of clothing on at one point and was still so cold that my brain wasn't functioning.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So tell us let's paint a picture for listeners of what was going on in the courtroom after. Tell me, before we get to when they started deliberating, tell me what you think the government did that hurt their case. And you've spoken to jurors.
I did.
You just had
I
a
can
story.
kind of go off
Yeah.
what they told me.
Yeah, tell us what the jurors told
sure.
you.
I spoke to a couple jurors. They basically described that going into the jury room after the trial, they took an initial sort of poll among themselves, and 11 of them were in favor of not guilty for Andrew, with a single person saying that they thought that he was guilty. And to hear it from these other jurors, there was a sort of a lone juror in there who, according to them, just refused to budge. They said would not participate in deliberations. They described,
really?
Yeah, and I'd like to be able to talk to this person because I've only gotten sort of one side of the story from
like the rogue juror.
That's sort of how they describe it. And then there was a second juror that became that sort of part of that 10-2 vote who apparently switched sides at the end, but they also said that person was sort of not bending and had their minds made up from the start.
From when they first
I guess so.
started deliberations.
Mm-hmm.
So the 10-2, what you're talking about, so maybe just to be clear, Andrew Gillum was charged with making false statements.
That's right.
That he was acquitted on. The hung jury came on the allegations of conspiracy to commit fraud and committing fraud.
That's right.
And then you reported that the jury, and I also heard from one of the defense lawyers that was a 10-2
That's right.
split.
For Andrew.
For Andrew.
A little closer for his co-defendant Sharon Littman Hicks. Some of those votes were 9-3 on some of the wire fraud counts.
Right. But so that's what happens.
But the jury basically said that there were two folks in there that you know,
we're like, hell no, this guy's guilty.
Basically.
We're not backing down.
Yeah. Which I assume is a juror's prerogative. I mean, but they saw that as very unfair. They feel like Andrew didn't get a fair trial because of that, because they don't feel like the case was fairly deliberated, basically. In the
They
jury
feel like these two people had already made up their minds before even they went in.
Basically, or from the get-go, essentially, in the jury room.
Now, we've heard the government say that they were going to pursue a second trial against these two. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's actually going to happen?
I don't know. That's one of the things I'm sort of looking into. The defense lawyers very publicly outside the courthouse were saying, government,
of
don't
course,
proceed.
Don't waste the taxpayers'
That's right.
money.
And that was before sort of knowing what had gone on in the jury room.
Behind the scenes.
Now we know that the vote wasn't close, basically, between the jurors.
Right.
And so, knowing that, the defense and these jurors themselves have voted for acquittal are saying, don't proceed.
Recommending that they just dropped enough already.
Which is actually really extraordinary. You don't usually see jurors come out and sort of issue that kind of advice.
Because it is a grand jury that issued the indictment.
That's right. But the jurors in the trial, they were telling me that, at one point during deliberations, a few of them they wondered aloud, how did this get past the grand jury? Yeah, I mean, they thought the case was so flimsy that it never should have gotten past the grand jury.
It is interesting. I don't know if you've ever been inside, but my understanding is that federal prosecutors, state prosecutors, whenever the prosecutors are dealing with the grand jury, they have a lot of leeway, and juries can be very malleable, and so if they want a presentment...
Right, there's the old ham sandwich thing or whatever, right?
What's the ham sandwich?
That you can get a ham sandwich indicted
right.
by a grand jury if you're a prosecutor.
Right,
I don't think I'm making that up, but I may be.
Well, I
may be just simply...
No, I think I've heard that, but I wanted you to say it. And... me. That wasn't the one I was looking for.
Oh, I thought you were doing
There we go. So tell us a little bit about what it's been like for you. This has gone on since Andrew... I mentioned that Andrew Gillum was Tallahassee mayor. Of course, he was not only the Tallahassee mayor, he was the Democratic nominee for governor, who lost just by a razor-thin margin to Governor DeSantis in his first run for governor in 2018. So you were covering all of this investigation for many, many years. Tell us what that's been like for you to be following the work of these federal investigators and some of the more salacious anecdotes from what we've heard about Costa Rica and Hamilton and the undercover agent whose name is Sweets or Sweet or whatever. What's it been like?
It's been, super fascinating, basically. And, you sort of can't believe your ears and your eyes as you start to learn these things. Thinking back, we didn't know that there were 3 undercover agents in Tallahassee. Mike Miller, Mike Sweets, Brian Butler, posing as these, Mike Sweets was this former drug dealer, party guy, and this sort of surfer dude persona.
He's the guy with the bleached blonde, long hair.
Yeah. And these folks were just, ingratiated themselves into the lives of these people that Tallahasseans have known for years. Scott Maddox, former mayor, Tallahassee City Commissioner. Andrew Gillum served on the city commission since he was still at FAMU. Back in 2003, was first elected. So, so to hear sort of these tales of people running around in New York City, going to see Hamilton. There were the agents flew out to Vegas with Scott Maddox and went to the Larry Flint's Hustler Club, and there was Sweets actually paid for a lap dance for Scott there, and that became a point of contention, in the appeal of the J.T. Burnett case.
It's like a Netflix miniseries.
It could be. And Scott posed sort of infamously now with the little person, adult entertainer, we assume, and with the hang 10 sign or whatever.
He's doing a little cool hand.
Yeah, the cool hand. It wasn't quite a motley crew. I think it was a hang 10 or something.
Hang 10.
I didn't grow up on the coast, so.
Yeah. Well, Scott Maddox is in prison in Pensacola right now and I think he's not going to be released for... Is he in Pensacola or is he in Alabama?
I just looked him up this morning. I should be able to... But yes, Scott's in Talladega, I believe. And they were all sent to minimum security prison camps.
Right.
So Scott Maddox got 5 years, believe is in Talladega. J.T. Burnett got 3. He's in Pensacola.
For taking bribes.
That's right.
Now, one of the things in Andrew Gillum's trial that the federal government said right out of the gate was that, Andrew Gillum's not accused of taking a bribe. He did not take a bribe. And his defense team made kind of a big stink about that. They tried to buy him off. They tried repeatedly to bribe him, and he wasn't having any. What say you?
I asked the jurors that because I just was curious how large that loomed in their minds as they were thinking about all of this and trying to figure out what to do. And they really kind of didn't, they sort of knew that, that wasn't, they were really looking at the evidence itself, and so he wasn't charged with bribery, so they didn't really need to sort of figure that one out.
Did they feel like they put a target, that the government put a target on Gillum and tried to nab him?
I don't know that they feel that way, but I think that they didn't have kind things to say about, the false statements charge stemmed from this interview that these overt FBI agents did with Andrew Gillum in the middle of Cascades Park at 8 a.m. one morning. When they went to his house, he wasn't there, so they met him in the park. And I think I really don't know the answer to that. I can't
did
remember. Did
race come into anything that they said?
They said that it did. So, they said politics didn't really play a factor, at least for
for
these
the ones,
jurors and
right.
the ones that they were kind of being the spokesperson for.
Right.
And again, I haven't sort of confirmed that with the others. I've only spoken to 2.
Right. The jury had 5 black members, and the rest, I think, were white. I don't know if there were any Hispanics on. But privately and in court documents, Andrew Gillum's defense team made the argument, not privately,
they did.
publicly,
Well,
but
right.
they weren't allowed to.
The jury didn't see that.
Right, but they did make the argument that he was targeted in part because of his race.
They did. I mean, they said that he was targeted politically and that, other people running for high office were not investigated the way he was. But Judge Alan Windsor kept, that stuff out.
Judge Windsor was appointed by Donald Trump, so a lot of people were questioning whether another judge would have handled things the way Judge Windsor did. A lot of the defense lawyers privately were making comments about the way that Windsor managed the trial.
Well, they were being ruled against a lot. I mean, their motions, a lot of their motions were being overruled.
There were anomalies. One, Alex Morris, who represent one of Ms. Letman Hicks's lawyers, said in court one day that there were a number of anomalies. For example, the jury went home very early one day at 3:30 in the afternoon.
So that turned out to just be someone had an appointment.
I said that, didn't I say that?
I don't remember, but I bet I'm sure you did.
At the
And I'm sure
time,
that
I said,
was
it
wrong
could have
about-
been just somebody had a doctor appointment or their kid had a show or something. But when you're in the courthouse like this for hours and hours and hours waiting, you try to come up with all kinds of explanations for everything that happens or doesn't happen, right?
No, completely. I mean, the jury set up 13 different notes or what, each one comes in, we're all, everyone in the courtroom is trying to figure out what it might mean,
right?
Reading the tea leaves or whatever. And
one of my ex-husbands accused me of being so busy reading between the lines that I didn't read the lines.
Right.
It kind of felt like that when I was in the courtroom.
Well, it's funny when you find out how off you were, and
Yeah.
I'm off sometimes in my theories.
But I felt that it was a big surprise when we got that not guilty verdict on the first charge, on the making false statements.
Yeah.
Is it just me, or did?
Well, it wasn't just you, and I mean, because we were sitting there, I think the defense was concerned about that. We sort of heard whispers that people deep inside, the Gillum camp were really worried about that one. It doesn't carry a giant sentence, but it would have made him a felon had he been convicted of that.
And they already were sort of putting forward plans or strategies for how appealable this would be.
Right.
They were floating that out there.
Sure. I mean, we were kind of hearing that were that to happen, the defense was fairly optimistic about their chances on appeal with that one, but who knows?
Were you surprised, though, after seeing the guilty verdicts in Scott Maddox and J.T. Burnett and Paige Carter-Smith? Did you expect a guilty verdict in Andrew Gillum's trial, too?
No,
The government,
not necessarily.
no, you were saying the government's case, I was only there for opening arguments, but it was so complicated and they outlined every contribution just in their opening arguments, 30-minute or whatever. They went through a litany of this.
There was a lot. I mean, because, it's a saga that spans, now we're going back 7 years, I guess, and there were sort of these two disparate parts of the investigation. One all had to do with the making of the false statements and what happened in New York City when Gillum went infamously to see Hamilton with these undercover FBI agents who at the time he thought they were businessmen,
They were his friends. He went to the gym with them.
He did go to the gym with Mike Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if he knew Brian Butler at that point, who was this bald guy who posed as a green energy business guy who would install.
Who was the pot one? Weren't they
The pot was Mike
originally going to do?
Sweets. They all had their own legends, they call them, and they were fairly
Legends.
intricate and colorful and cinematic even.
Cinematic, good
yeah.
word. They actually used the word ingratiation. That is part of their strategy.
That's right.
I was trying to imagine as just what I heard that was undercover Mike Miller. I'm using air quotes for that because I guess that's not really his real name.
It's not.
But when he was testifying, they were talking, I believe they were talking about the tickets, and the New York trip was part of the ingratiation.
Right, exactly. So sometimes when the undercovers are with you, they're trying to glean information, extract information and really do their investigation. But then other times it's strictly social. They're trying to build.
They're just sucking up to you.
Yeah, they're very well said. Maybe they're not sucking up so much, but they're
trying to make friends.
Trying to, exactly.
Right. So they called it ingratiation. So I was trying to.
And they're giving you stuff. I mean, they were doling out tickets in hotel rooms and meals.
Right.
And that, so they're
yeah.
that all happens too.
So I was just wondering what it would feel like for Andrew Gillum if you're thinking back, you're sitting in court and you were in New York and these guys show up and they're like, hey, we got a buddy, we're going to take a boat ride in the harbor and, we got these tickets to this game. And you'd been hanging out with them for a couple years, maybe going to the gym with one of them, think they're your friends. Okay. Think they're your friends. Afterwards, he thought they were his friends for a while longer, though, right?
I mean, they're not. I don't think that.
What it's like to hear this person say, "This was part of our ingratiation."
Yeah.
This is what we were doing. I was just thinking, like, as a person, what it might have felt like to hear someone say, "I was playing him."
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You've been tricked, basically. So,
right.
I mean, I can only imagine that you would feel that maybe there was a betrayal there or whatever, but the fact is these are government agents, they're not your friend.
Right. I don't know. It just struck me when I heard that. I was just like, okay, what if you,
I mean, you wonder, you do wonder what the jurors are thinking about all that. It doesn't matter
right.
what I think,
Yeah.
And so you wonder if the jurors sort of don't think that's cool, that undercover agents are cozying up to people and pretending to be people that they're not and all those things. But as they explained, I can't remember if it was jury instructions or at some point, but these are perfectly legitimate, obviously, and long used investigative techniques.
Right. Yeah, they're not illegal or anything. I mean, that's just what they do. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back with Tallahassee Democrat investigative reporter Jeff Burlew.
From the team that brought you Deeper Dive with Dara Cam comes a brand new e-newsletter on the Florida man who may be president. Governor Ron DeSantis is his own conservative brand, an unapologetic culture warrior who could run for the White House as early as 2024. The DeSantis Files is your one-stop shop for the best in reporting, analysis, and opinion on the man's supporters call America's governor. Delivered straight to your inbox twice a week. Learn more by emailing editor@cityandstatefl.com. That's cityandstatefl.com. Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Welcome back to a Deeper Dive with Dara. What was the biggest surprise? You've been covering this for years, but there was more information that you learned during the trial. What were some of the biggest surprises for you?
the one part of this case, which all dealt with the contributions that had come up through the Gillum campaign and then into
different nonprofits
and through these big grant making organizations. One founded by George Soros. These were not fly by night. These are like well established,
sophisticated
big
groups,
big foundations, and with lots of money. None of those. So witnesses who represented all of those groups came in to testify on behalf. The government called all these people, and none of them were up there tearfully recalling how the defendants had ripped them off.
Right. They didn't feel like they got hosed.
They basically said that, and then the defense would pounce in at the end and say, "Well, do you think Andrew Gillum's an honest person?" And they would, that happened a few times, and some of them had known Andrew and Sharon for many years, were friends.
Right.
One guy who was with the Opportunity to Learn Action Fund, who had previously been with the NAACP and had known them for a long time, but a lot of those folks just said, yes, I think they're honest. Did
that surprise you that they felt like?
I guess what I was trying to say was that part of their case, the whole thing was kind of a surprise because a lot of that had not really been unveiled. We had the indictment, we had a bunch of motions and stuff, but we didn't really know exactly what had happened there. In fact, we didn't piece together kind of who all those nonprofits were until just days before the trial. We published an article about that.
Okay.
So there was always kind of a bigger mystery there that we had difficulty sort of penetrating.
Well, because they say follow the money, so if you can't, it's hard to follow the money if you don't know where the money is coming from.
Right. Well, and that's exactly so. And that's what the government was trying to do, was trying to walk jurors through sort of where the money went and how it traveled and all of that. It was really complicated.
Yeah.
And the prosecutor said at the outset, you're gonna know more about campaign finance law and all this stuff than you ever wanted to know. But talking to the jurors, they were just bored silly by some of this stuff. Some of them had trouble staying awake.
There was a dozer.
There were, I didn't see jurors falling asleep, but from where we were sitting, it's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah.
Are you squinting? Is your eyes, I don't know. But one of the jurors mentioned she had to kick a neighbor every once in a while.
Oh, really?
They were starting to snore. And we saw Windsor at one point. I can't remember if you were there that day, but just, I think some jurors had their eyes closed, and he said, I don't know if you're thinking.
Right.
Or what, but just try to keep your eyes open so I'll know that you're awake. And if you need a break, we'll give you one. But you could see that the judge I could see him jump in every once in a while when the jurors had sort of had enough. You could tell from their body language or whatever, because there was sort of a pummeling volume of exhibits and evidence, and the government kept showing a lot of the same evidence again and again because it would come up sort of in different facets of their case or whatever, but the jurors ended up seeing a lot of these things just repeatedly. The same email, the same whatever would be on the screen again and being discussed again. And the jurors that I spoke with, just they felt that they didn't need to see all of that again and all the time. So I think to hear it from them, and again, this is just two people I spoke with, but they found it pretty tedious. They thought that the delivery of the government lawyers was boring, and they were like being lulled to sleep. I mean, one of them said the minute one person would talk, like it just made her want to go to sleep.
There was one of the government's lawyers, I will say, had a very, very soft-spoken, kind of monotone voice. I found that was difficult to even hear what they were saying at times. So I can imagine for a juror...
Well, they have to walk sort of this line to, I would imagine, to not seem sort of overzealous or whatever. Like, part of this was that the government wanted to go after Andrew for some reason, and so I have no idea if this is a thing or not, but I can imagine
right,
sort of your demeanor in there being a consideration and trying to not be over the top.
Right, you don't want to appear as if you are, as you say, overzealous, like you targeted this person
Right.
and have you're on a crusade to bring him down.
Right.
One of the other things I found was interesting. Well, in your story, I saw a story that you wrote today, I think, that the jurors had taken pictures off the walls so that they could tape up some of these exhibits,
Right.
and they had.
So the jury, I mean, they say that they would have been more than willing, or not, I shouldn't say more than willing, but they were ready to deliver guilty verdicts if they had seen guilt, if it had been proven to them beyond a reasonable doubt. This is what they told me. And so one of them actually said we were kind of a little bit rooting for him because they for the prosecution, because they were telling themselves, well, there must be something here because they went this far, went to the grand
Right.
jury, they brought it to trial.
Right.
Where is it? And so
We're trying to find it. We're trying to find it.
They said they were going through boxes and boxes. They, as you know, they'd asked for one of your little mini scoops was they'd asked for
Highlighters and paper clips.
That's right. And so, then Post-it notes and other things on other days. But they took the stuff down off the walls. They put up like big charts on big pieces of paper and other notes, and they made timelines and diagrams, they said. And they listened again to the secret FBI recordings and read and reread exhibits, and they just said they could. They just said it was completely circumstantial. They had nothing that they could. In fact, that they could find guilt on.
I'll tell you what surprised me. Since I'm not afraid to show my stupidity.
I'm not afraid to show.
One of the things I'm just saying. I make predictions about stuff.
No, that's good. I try not to do.
I do that now. I think I feel like I have more leeway on the podcast.
You should,
so
and you do.
I
don't.
Whatever. Plus, my age, I think too.
Right.
I was surprised that it was 10-2. That's Max. That was 10-2 on acquittal.
Yes.
I thought there would be more people who thought that they had done something wrong than did not. So basically for me, I would have thought it would have been closer in favor of guilt.
Right, and I think that's just sort of a natural
That to me was
assumption.
a surprise.
Yeah,
that there were just two holdouts. I would have thought if you told me there were two holdouts, I would have thought those were two holdouts in favor of Gillum and
right,
and Ms. Letman Hicks.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
Right.
So when I saw that, when one of the defense lawyers texted me and said, 10-2 acquittal, I was like, what? And then when your story came out with more information about what the jurors actually, with their statement and, their thinking and how and where they were, I just found that to be very surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a surprise to me because I really didn't know how this thing was going to go.
Do you think there's a chance they would try to that the government would try to get this moved to another venue?
I've heard that. I mean, I've heard that sort of whispered in the background of things that maybe that's what needs to be. Maybe that's what needs to happen so that the government has a better shot, I suppose. But I need to do more reporting on that. Frankly, I don't know. I know there's the lawyers are calling for the government to walk away from this. The jurors have also been talking to the defense lawyers. The defense lawyers said they had nothing to do with the writing of that statement or anything.
Right. But it would be useful for the defense lawyers to have conversations with the jurors so that they know if this case does come down again, if it's tried a second time, it kind of gives them a playbook for how to appeal to jurors, although there'll be a different makeup, but... Right.
Yeah. And it's just knowing that margin, the 10-2 thing.
Right.
I mean, that's what I think that they're using those numbers to, try to persuade, the feds that they shouldn't pursue this. I'm just curious, and I wish I knew the answer to this, but that decision is not going to be made, I would assume, by the assistant U.S. attorneys that were sitting there and prosecuting Andrew Gillum. I would imagine it would, and U.S. Attorney Jason Cootie and all the way up.
Sure, that's
DOJ
a Department of Justice decision.
Right, and I wonder, I've been wondering how far up that decision might go. I'm going to try to figure that one out. But
is Cootie still an interim, or was he?
He's not. He's just I don't believe he was ever nominated or by the president or confirmed. But I think they dropped the interim thing. It's another little.
I don't see interim on the press releases anymore, so I don't know. He was in the courtroom.
He was.
Much of the time when the jurors would send a question, and it's interesting. So, do you cover a lot of jury trials?
I don't. I don't. I've covered my share, but other reporters, certainly the Democrat, the late great Carl Etters, who's shouldn't say late. He's still with us.
He's late to the Democrat, but he is not late to the world. Hey, Carl, hope you're listening.
We miss you, Carl. But no, so it's not a thing that I cover. I cover them from time to time.
So I don't. I cover a lot of civil cases, and so it was interesting to me the differences in how judges handle, the whole jury selection process and they write something down on a piece of paper and the waiting around and inside the courtroom. I mean, I'm usually waiting at home at the Lafayette Park Bureau stalking on Pacer for the outcome of a judge's decision.
Right.
So I found that to be an interesting kind of just a part of our judicial system that I was unfamiliar with. A federal jury too is different, and the federal.
We have to go through security and metal detectors. You got to take every time you go through security, you have to take your shoes and belt off.
Yeah.
No electronics in the courtroom, just for folks who may not know
For
that. But it's
everyone.
you go in with a pen and a notepad and can make it pretty no recorders. So you're just praying that you're taking notes accurately.
You're regretting that you never learned shorthand.
Regretting that I don't have a. Yes, exactly.
I don't even know. It was funny because we were talking with one of the younger reporters, and I was saying something about Perry Mason, and she didn't know who Perry Mason was. And I thought, well, I just aged myself. But I thought that was kind of funny. Well, you cover other kinds and you're an investigative reporter. Mm-hmm. What other investigations have you been working on recently?
Did a lot of stories earlier this year about a Tallahassee Police Department officer who tested positive for amphetamine, and that became like a big city story. But a lot of my time I can't even remember what I was doing before the Andrew Gillum trial, frankly, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do after. But because it's like going off to battle, and we finally come home, and it wasn't that long, and it wasn't as hard as real battle, but it is this sort of experience that you go through, and it becomes sort of all-consuming, just being in the courtroom early before trial starts when the lawyers are gabbing about stuff, and you got to stay late through maybe the motions that are being made with the jury out of the room,
right.
Even though maybe you're never ever going to write about that, because it's a long thing.
There's a lot of, and that's how I feel.
And very, brain sapping. If I sound dumb, I'm going to blame it on that.
It is very challenging, because when you're in the room, you're listening, and you're writing stuff down on paper. You don't have really access to, when you're listening on a call. So a lot of times they have these court calls that are telephonic before the actual trial takes place. You're able to look at documents online while you're on those calls, but you can't when you're in the courtroom. So you really do have to. It does stretch your memory.
And they don't hand you. You don't have the exhibits in front of you, the evidence in front of you. It's flashing on the screen at the same way the jurors see it. But they get to go back in the jury room and pore over that. We still don't have the exhibits.
Yeah.
And so you're always, I was in there frantically, an email would flash up on the screen and you'd try to write down as much of it as you could. And
yeah. Well, you did a great job.
No, I don't know about that.
You did a great job of keeping the community, the state, informed about what was going on inside the courtroom and what went on in the years leading up to the trial. So
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your watchdoggery.
Did my best.
You did a great job.
Always worry it's not.
You did a great job. So thanks for joining us.
Sure.
All right, well, we got Max in the background saying bye-bye to Jeff Burlew, investigative reporter with the Tallahassee Democrat. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you come back again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and I will.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is a podcast by City and State Florida, hosted by Dara Cam, produced by Ryan Daly, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs LLC and performed by Ryan Daly and Danny Reyes.